My son called me a burden 2 weeks after my stroke. The boy I raised alone. The same boy whose company I helped build with $280,000 of my retirement. But he didn't know that because I never told him. Not about the money, not about the technical designs I refined for him under a fake consulting name, and certainly not about how proud I used to be just sitting in the background, quietly watching him rise. I've always believed in building things, homes, bridges, futures. Even now, retired from structural engineering, I still catch myself analyzing the framing of every building I walk into, fingers twitching at old drafting habits. But my favorite structure wasn't one I built with steel or concrete. It was my son's life. Michael had always been ambitious, creative, and driven, but prone to burning out. After his divorce, he hit rock bottom. He came to me with nothing but sketches and a shaky dream, a firm that designed more than buildings. It designed experiences. I listened. I made tea. And then I wrote a check for $280,000. Not out of pity, out of belief. But I made it clear. This isn't a handout. I'm investing, and I want it official. He laughed, but I wasn't joking. We set it up properly. 40% stake, silent partnership, no name on the wall. Just EH Structure LLC listed discreetly in the incorporation docs. More than that, I offered something Michael never even noticed: expert review. I'd log in at night under that same LLC, fixing technical flaws in his firm's designs, optimizing structural plans, submitting notes through his junior project manager, who never once asked who I really was. And that was fine. I didn't need recognition. I had my garden, my books, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I helped hold his dreams upright. He got busier, called less. I told myself it was a good sign. I don't know if you've ever done that, stood in the background, giving everything, hoping it would be enough. But sometimes silence doesn't mean strength. It just means no one saw you. He was flying, and I was his invisible runway. But lately, something had shifted. He talked faster, listened less, and somewhere in his tone, I started hearing something that felt colder, transactional. At the time, I brushed it off. I thought, maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe he's just tired. I didn't know the real fracture had already begun, and it would take a medical crisis and a cruel sentence from my own son to show me just how far apart we'd grown. The stroke came without warning. One minute I was trimming the roses out back. The next I was waking up in a hospital bed with my right side numb and my mouth full of cotton. It wasn't a massive stroke. The doctors called it moderate but significant, a phrase that felt like a warning, like the start of a slow decline. But I wasn't planning on going quietly. I worked, harder than I'd ever worked in my life. Occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. I pushed through every session like it was a construction deadline. My body was the job site, and I refused to let it collapse. Michael came to see me at the hospital. He brought me a tablet preloaded with streaming shows I'd never watch and a tote bag full of organic snacks I couldn't chew. He stayed for 23 minutes. I counted. "Once you're discharged," he said, not meeting my eyes, "you'll come stay with us for a bit, just until you're stable." I wanted to believe him. I needed to. So I moved into their guest room, a beige, lifeless little box in the back of their McModern house, where the thermostat was always set to his wife's comfort, not mine. At first, he was kind, checked in, drove me to appointments. But within 2 weeks, his tone shifted. He stopped asking, "How are you feeling?" and started asking, "What's your plan?" Then one morning, over breakfast, while I struggled to open a jar of jam, he said it. "You've got to admit this isn't working, Mom. You need more care than we can give. We've got a baby on the way. We didn't plan for this." Didn't plan for me. He slid a brochure across the table like it was a menu. A local assisted living facility, spa amenities, 24-hour care, starting at $4,600 a month. "I think this would be best for everyone," he added, as if I was a logistics problem to be solved. Maybe you've heard that tone before, the one where someone says they mean well, but all you feel is rejection, like you're being handled, not helped. Maybe you've been there too. If you have, just know you're not alone. Some of us gave everything and somehow still ended up too much. I didn't cry. I simply folded the brochure and said, "Let me think about it." He kissed my forehead like he was doing me a favor. But something cracked in me that day. Not just my heart, but the foundation of everything I believed we had. He'd forgotten who I was. He saw the limp, the slower speech, the cane. He no longer saw the woman who helped him stand in the first place. No one told me to leave, but everything in their silence said, "Go." I moved back into my house on a Wednesday. No one offered to help me pack. Michael had a work call. His wife was managing the baby registry. So I folded what I could, loaded what I couldn't, and called a car service to drive me home. I watched their front door close behind me and tried not to cry. But something inside me had already gone very quiet. My house felt too big when I got back. Too many steps, too many shadows, too much silence. I sat on the couch that first night and stared at the blank TV screen for hours. I didn't eat, didn't move. The only sound in the house was the hum of the fridge and the slow unraveling of something I couldn't name. A few days later, a manila envelope arrived in the mail. Inside, a formal letter from Michael's office. No note, no phone call, just legal paperwork asking me to sign over my stake in his company. He wrote that it would simplify future decisions and that he'd ensure I was taken care of. Like I was a financial problem he could smooth over. That night, I almost signed the papers. I had the pen in hand. The thought crossed my mind, what's the point of holding on? But something held me back. Instead, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. It held all the old files from Structure, my LLC, the pseudonym I used to submit technical feedback to Michael's firm. I'd archived everything: designs, revision notes, registered documents, patent filings, all in my name. At the bottom of the folder, I found something I hadn't thought about in a long time: a printed certificate for the engineering framework I designed years ago. The same system his firm was still using for their award-winning residential structures. I stared at it for a long time, and suddenly, I wasn't tired anymore. Maybe you've been there, on the edge of giving up, until you remember something no one else seems to, who you really are, and that maybe, just maybe, they forgot who you were because you stopped reminding them. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't sign. I made tea. I turned on the lamp, and I began sorting through every contract I had ever signed with that company. Because if Michael wanted to pretend I had nothing left to offer, then maybe it was time to remind him exactly what I built. I hadn't been in that room for years. The study was once my sanctuary, lined with books on design theory, structural dynamics, ethics and engineering. After the stroke, I stopped going in. The stairs made it hard, so did the memories. But now, I was there, sitting at my old desk, tea growing cold beside stacks of folders I hadn't touched in a decade. I was looking for one thing: truth, not revenge, just clarity. It didn't take long to find what I needed. Michael never paid attention to paperwork, so I'd kept all the important documents myself. The founding agreement, signed 12 years ago, REH, Structure LLC would hold a 40% stake in Harris Pla Design. All proprietary use of the EHS framework, mine, was to be disclosed and compensated. I flipped to the clause he must have forgotten. Any request for stake transfer must be initiated with written mutual consent and legal counsel present. No such meeting ever happened. He tried to erase me with a mailing label. I wasn't just an investor. I was co-founder and the technical backbone of their entire design identity. I gathered everything: copies of emails, timestamps of revisions, my engineering license. I even pulled out old voice memos I'd sent their lead drafter under the EH alias. The little suggestions that saved a dozen projects from structural failure. He didn't just owe me respect, he owed me credit. And legally, I still had the power to stop the firm from using my system altogether. I didn't want that. What I wanted was to be seen. The next morning, I made a call I hadn't made in years. "Julian Construction?" a voice answered. "This is Evelyn Harris," I said, steady and clear. "I'm calling about a design I licensed through Harris Plus Design. I need to schedule a meeting with legal present." There was a pause, then a shift in tone. "Yes, ma'am. I'll set that up immediately." Sometimes the truth doesn't roar. It waits, quietly, like steel under pressure, until it's time to bear the weight. And when that time comes, no one, not even your own son, can claim you were never part of the foundation. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt ready. Because while Michael may have called me a burden, he was about to find out what it really meant to carry the weight of truth. The meeting was quiet, no yelling, no drama, just polished conference tables and polite legal language. Michael walked in late, still in his tailored blazer, still looking like the boy who thought charm was strategy. He didn't recognize the woman sitting at the far end of the table at first, not with the straight posture, the calm expression, the folder of contracts neatly opened in front of her. "Mom?" That one word cracked through the room. "I'm not here as your mother today," I said gently. "I'm here as Evelyn Harris, co-founder and rights holder of the structural design system you've built your firm around." He blinked, stammered, looked toward the lawyer seated beside him. She already had a copy of the founding documents. I'd sent them the week before. For once, Michael didn't have anything slick to say. Over the next 40 minutes, I laid it out clearly. I wouldn't sue. I wouldn't go public. But the firm would. Acknowledge my role in the foundation of their design methodology, return my official stake as outlined in the original agreement, and implement a quarterly ethics oversight committee, with one seat reserved for me. Michael opened his mouth once, probably to protest, but his lawyer touched his arm. He stayed quiet after that. I didn't feel triumphant when I left the office. I felt steady, like I'd put the last brick back into a foundation that had been cracked too long. That night, I watered the plants on my porch and listened to the cicadas hum in the trees. No press releases, no vindictive letters, just me, standing. Sometimes your victory isn't a headline. It's a quiet room where no one can ignore you anymore. It's sitting across from the very person who erased you and watching them realize they never could. A week later, a small package arrived at my door. Inside, a revised shareholder certificate and a typed note from the firm's board. "Your system remains the spine of our work. We thank you for reminding us where our strength came from." No signature from Michael, but I didn't need one. I had mine. It's funny what changes when people know who you really are. The next time Michael came by, he didn't let himself in like he used to. He rang the doorbell. When I opened the door, he stood there with a pie box in his hands and hesitation in his eyes. "I thought maybe we could talk," he said, "if you're open to it." I stepped aside and nodded toward the kitchen. We didn't talk about the meeting, or the documents, or the ethics seat I now occupied in his company's quarterly reviews. We talked about my garden, his daughter's new obsession with dinosaurs, the fact that he still couldn't make a pie crust from scratch. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was real. Weeks passed. I resumed my consulting work slowly, 2 clients at a time, focusing on projects that aligned with my ethics. I started mentoring young women in engineering again, quiet coffee chats, reading over designs, offering encouragement that had once felt far away from me. The cane stayed by the door, but some days I didn't need it. I was stronger now, not just physically, but in the way that mattered most. I knew what I was worth, and I no longer needed anyone else to confirm it. Melissa called one evening. She'd heard what happened. Michael had mentioned it to her, though not in detail. "You know," she said, "he's still trying to make sense of it." "I'm not angry," I replied. "Just tired of pretending I didn't build the thing he's standing on." There was a pause on the line. "Mom," she said softly, "I hope someday I'm as quietly powerful as you are." That made me smile. Maybe you don't need to burn bridges. Maybe you just need to stop building them for people who never plan to walk back across. Maybe the quietest endings are the ones where you finally stop explaining and start living. This story didn't end in court. It didn't end in an apology. It ended with me reclaiming the space I never should have left in the first place. And this time, I'm staying.